days of Elijah, declaring the word of the Lord. And these are the days of your servant Moses, righteousness being restored. And though these are days of great trials, of famine and darkness and sword, still we are the voice in the desert, crying, prepare ye the way of the Lord. Behold, he comes, riding on the clouds, shining like the sun. At the trumpet call, so lift your voice. It's the year of Jubilee, and out of Zion's hill salvation comes. And these are the days of Ezekiel, the dry bones becoming as flesh. And these are the days of your servant David, rebuilding a temple of praise. And these are the days of the harvest, the fields are as white in the world. And we are the laborers in your vineyard, declaring the word of the Lord. Behold, he comes, riding on the clouds, shining like the sun. At the trumpet call, so lift your voice. It's the year of Jubilee, and out of Zion's hill salvation comes. There's no God like Jehovah. 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 Behold, he
Riding
comes,
on the clouds,
riding on the clouds,
shining like the sun.
shining like the sun.
At the trumpet
trumpet
call,
call,
so lift your voice. Year of Jubilee,
year of Jubilee, and out of Zion's hill salvation comes. Who was and who is to come? Who was and who is to come?
Ahab was a very bad king, and his wife Jezebel was even worse. She was a worshiper of Baal, a pagan god of fire and fertility. God was very angry with King Ahab and Jezebel for leading people astray, and sent a prophet named Elijah with a message. As surely as the Lord God of Israel lives, the God whom I worship and serve, there will be no rain during the next few years until I give the word. Now King Ahab and Jezebel were furious. God told Elijah to get out of there quick and hide near a brook. Drink from the brook and eat what the ravens bring you, for I have commanded them to bring you food. So Elijah camped near the brook and drank from it. Ravens brought him bread and meat every morning and every evening as well. But because there was no rainfall in the land, the brook that Elijah was drinking from began to dry up. Then the Lord said to Elijah, "Go and live in the city of Zarephath. There is a widow there who will feed you." So Elijah went to Zarephath. When Elijah arrived at the city gate, he saw a widow gathering sticks and asked her to bring him some water and bread. The widow explained that she only had enough oil and flour for one last meal for her and her son. Elijah promised her, "The Lord our God says, that there will always be flour in your bin and oil in your jar until he allows it to rain again. And from then on, no matter how much oil and flour the widow used, she always had enough. Sometime later, the widow's son got very sick, and then he died. The widow cried out to Elijah, "Why did this happen? Did you come here to punish me for my sins by killing my son?" "Give me your son," Elijah said. Then he laid the boy out on the bed in the upper room. Elijah began to pray over the boy. 3 times he did this, and on the third time, the boy's life returned to him. Elijah brought the boy downstairs and gave him to his mother. The woman fell on her knees and said, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that he speaks through you." The drought in Israel was in its 3rd year. People were starving and dying of thirst. God told Elijah, "The time for the drought is nearing its end. Go and present yourself to King Ahab." So Elijah headed back south into Israel. In the meantime, King Ahab had sent a man called Obadiah out to search for pastures and water for his horses. While he was searching, he found Elijah. "Go tell King Ahab that I am here," Elijah told him. King Ahab went out to meet Elijah. "So, Israel's great troublemaker has returned," Ahab snarled. God had another message for Elijah to give the disobedient king. "Go and bring the 450 prophets of Baal to Mount Carmel, along with 400 prophets of Asherah. Then summon all the people of Israel. It's time for a contest." So messengers were sent out to summon the priests of the false gods and the people of Israel to gather on Mount Carmel. So 850 false prophets and a vast crowd gathered on Mount Carmel in the north of Israel. Elijah addressed the large crowd of onlookers. "How long will you waver between 2 gods? You cannot be loyal to both. Today is the day that you will choose one or the other. If Baal is God, choose him. But if the one true God of Israel is God, then worship only him." Then, at God's command, Elijah began to direct the setup for the contest. "Bring me 2 bulls and some wood. The prophets of Baal get first choice. Let them choose a bull, prepare it, and lay it on the wood of their altar. I will prepare the other bull on the other altar. Then call on the name of your God. I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by setting fire to the wood is the one true God." All the people agreed. So the prophets of Baal prepared the bull and began to call on the name of Baal all morning, shouting, "O Baal, answer us!" But there was no answer. They began to dance wildly and chant around the altar they had made. But still, not a hint of a reply. By afternoon, Elijah started to have fun with the situation, and he began to taunt the prophets. "Maybe your God is away on a business trip. Perhaps he is sleeping. Maybe he's in the bathroom or in some deep thought. I think you need to call a little louder." So the prophets of Baal began to shout louder. They even began to cut themselves, thinking that would get Baal's attention. But still, nothing. After the prophets of Baal spent all morning and most of the afternoon trying to get their God to answer them, there was no response. The false prophets collapsed on the ground in exhaustion. It was now Elijah's turn. Elijah took 12 stones, one to represent each of the tribes of Israel, to repair the altar of God. Then he dug a trench around the altar. He had the bull laid on the wood on the altar, and then requested that 4 large jars of water be poured over the bull, the wood, and the altar. So they did as Elijah requested. Then he told them to do it a second time, and they did. Finally, he asked for a third drenching, and they did it again. By this time, the trenches that were dug around the altar was overflowing with water. The people looked on in disbelief as the altar was soaked in water. How could this altar be set on fire? It was evening by now, and Elijah went to the altar and prayed, "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, prove today that you are God in Israel. I am your servant, and I have done all that you have commanded. O Lord, answer me, so that these people will know that you are the one true God." Immediately the fire of the Lord flashed down from heaven and burned up the bull, the wood, the stones, and the dust. It even licked up all the water in the trench. The people were in awe. They began to cry out, "The Lord is God! The Lord is God!" Then they chased after the prophets of Baal and put the false pagan prophets to death. Elijah turned to Ahab. "It hasn't rained for 3 years, but I hear a mighty rainstorm coming." Then he went up to the mountain with his servant to pray for rain. 6 times as he prayed, he sent his servant to look out over the sea and report what he saw. 6 times he returned to say that there was not a cloud in the sky. Elijah kept praying. The 7th time the servant went and looked, he returned to report, "I see a cloud rising from the sea, but it is no larger than a man's hand." "Hurry to Ahab," Elijah told his servant, "and tell him to climb into his chariot and race back home. If he doesn't hurry, the rain will stop you." Ahab quickly left for his home in Jezreel. The winds were kicking up and the skies were getting darker and darker. Ahab had his horses pulling his chariot as fast as they could go. "Faster, faster," he shouted. Heavy rain began to fall. Now the Lord gave special strength to Elijah. He tucked his cloak into his belt and ran faster than the horses pulling Ahab's chariot. Elijah beat Ahab to the entrance gate in Jezreel. I hope you enjoyed the story of Elijah. If you would like more activities or a more in-depth study, you can scan the QR code available here or simply type in the bit.ly link that you see as well. Either one will give you access to a PDF document for you to print and study more at home. Both the QR code and the bit.ly link here will provide you an in-depth study of Elijah and the fire that came from God